Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this licensing hearing. I'm hoping we have everyone present. I will just go through the people that are here. I'm Hilary Fairclough. I will be chairing this meeting this morning. Accompanying me will be Councillor Newhall and Councillor Flitcroft. Get my teeth in. And we make up the panel. There will also be Mrs. Ridge, the Senior Democratic Services Officer, who is here to record the things that go on this morning, and Miss Bainbridge from our Legal Services Department. We also have Miss Pritchard from our Licensing Department, and Mr. Charlton, I believe, who did the test purchase, PC Brookfield from the police, Liam Kelly from Trading Standards, and we have Mr. Mahmood and Mr. David Darlington from Fieldings Porter to present the case for the review of the Royle News. I think that's on Bury Road. So is everybody here that I've mentioned? Is there anybody? I know you can't say if you're not here, but we're all present.
Hello,
Hello?
Ian Howell from JTI.
All right, sorry. So is it not Mr. Charlton, or are you both here?
The line is very bad. I'm going to try and redial in.
Okay, Mr. Howell. Are you in place of Mr. Charlton?
Mr. Charlton's not attending. I'm also representing JTI, particularly with regard to the additional representation we made. But I can answer some of the questions, potentially the points that Mr. Charlton raised in his representation as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Right.
Can I add as well that I do have a
Yes.
couple of additional people with me, just to make everybody aware. I've got Yasmin Mahmood, who is Arshad Mahmood's wife, to assist him with any language issues that he could have, with English not being his first language. And I've also got Akhtar Bilal Mohammed, who is an interested party, which will become apparent as we go through the hearing.
Would that be a witness for you?
He is looking at taking over the business. So, yes.
Right, okay. So that's an interested party.
It's more for the committee's benefit, in case there's anything arising.
Right, okay, thank you for that. This review, we try to keep it relatively informal, but all questions do need to go through the chair. What will happen is that our licensing would present the case. In this case, it's a written statement. They may wish to add things to it, but we've all been served the papers. Everyone has a copy, and they will present the case on behalf of the licensing department. When that's been accepted, you may want to ask them questions on what that has been presented. Similarly, we on the panel may wish to ask them questions. Then it would be your turn, if you like, to submit your information regarding this review. We then may wish to ask you questions, as may the licensing officers, the police, or Trading Standards. When we feel that we've got enough information, and normally within sort of quarter of an hour maximum that you will be presenting your case, we will ask you to leave, and the committee will remain with our legal representative and our Democratic Services Officer, and we will make a decision. And that decision will be sent to you within 5 working days. I know it's more difficult when we're doing these things online, even though we've got a little bit more used to them now. But if there's any issues, that you are unsure about or you need clarification on, please do let me know, and I shall do my very best to make things right for you. So we are now going to start with the information from Miss Pritchard from licensing. Is there anything you need to add, Miss Pritchard, other than the written statements that have been given?
No, there's nothing further to add, Chair, other than we did receive some extra information this morning from Mr. Darlington.
Thank you.
I've asked if that can be considered, can be submitted and considered by you today.
Correct, that's right. We have looked at that, Mr. Darlington. Well, actually, that isn't true. We haven't looked at it because the meeting had already started by the time that it came through, so we weren't able to get the information up as a hard copy for us. However, we have had it read out to us what it is that you're suggesting, and we feel that it isn't necessary for us to actually see it. It is late, and under item 18, I think it is, we have the right to refuse it. But it is something we feel you will be able to present in your information. Yeah. So I hope you understand that.
I do, yes. It's a little, as you referred to, it's a little more awkward when we're all remote, because no one would have discussed outside whether everybody was happy
yes.
for them to be put forward, but it's a little more awkward at the moment.
Yes, that's right. I mean, and obviously, had it been sent last night or yesterday, we would have probably been forwarded it on, but unfortunately, it only came through at 5 to 9, and we were already starting preparation for the meeting. So yes, into both those things. So are there any questions from committee members on what has been submitted by licensing?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. I would just like to ask, there is reference from the police. They have submitted a statement about some complaints regarding the illegal sale of alcohol. Is it alcohol and to underage? I wonder if PC Brookfield, could you elaborate any more on that?
I can only sort of explain the statement which has been exhibited by PC Ditter, who was the neighbourhood beat officer for that particular area in Breightmet. She was the officer who attended the incident on the 21st of November at the Royal News, in which a complainant had reported to the police about her daughter, and a 30-year-old daughter and her friends had attended the shop and been able to purchase quite a large quantity of alcohol, and as a result of a daughter.
Yes.
Is everybody struggling to hear that submission, or is it just my line?
Well, I could hear it, but is everyone else clear?
I can hear it fine.
Okay, it's cleared now, but it went very Dalek-y for a couple of seconds.
Right, that's fine. Do you want PC Brookfield to start again?
It might be helpful, yes, please. Sorry for that.
No, it's thank you for letting us know. PC Brookfield, do you want to continue?
So, my involvement became after this incident. I'm quite new in Pulse, so I wasn't initially the attending officer at this particular incident. It was a PC Ditter, who's the neighbourhood beat officer for Bury Road in Breightmet, and she was attending a report to the police from a mother of a 13-year-old daughter of the incident on the 21st of November. Was reporting that a daughter and friends had attended the Royal News, in which they'd been able to purchase a large quantity of alcohol and then taken it to the local park to drink. And she reported to the police when she found a daughter in an intoxicated state, stating that obviously all the alcohol they bought was from the store. So yeah, it wasn't actually myself who's attended. Obviously, I'm sort of after the event, so to speak.
Right, okay. But there are other, there's one on the 28th of the 5th at 20. There's another one on the 3rd of the 8th. That's the test purchase we're discussing today. And there was one on 17th of the 11th and the 11th of the 11th. Those are the ones that are submitted in evidence. Has the police been? Is that the only complaints they've received, or has there been other intelligence? Do you know?
No, since obviously my position in this role, there hasn't been any further reported incidents. I do know historically, obviously, in relation to the reports you've mentioned, and basically as a result of those, the local neighbourhood team have had to put in what's known as a problem-solving report due to it being an area where a lot of youths congregate, and I know the store and that surrounding area have had quite a lot of issues with youth. So I do know it's an ongoing matter the neighbourhood team are trying to tackle.
Thank you for that. Right, now then, Mr. Darlington and Mr. Mahmood, are there any questions you would like to ask of the information that's been submitted by our licensing team?
There was just, let me just put the notes on there. I think it was more of a clarification, because of my understanding was slightly different from what was said in the report in relation to the license itself. I think it says in the report that the license was granted in 2018, but my understanding, he says this premises license was issued to Mr. Mahmood on the 9th of August 2018. My understanding is, though, that he's actually held the license for the premises since 2010, and that it was a change of address in 2018 which would have resulted in a new license being issued.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct. Yeah.
Right, so he's actually held a license since 2010.
He has, and I think it's important for the committee to understand that.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. So are there any other questions anyone wishes to ask of the information given by licensing? I am aware there is a bit of an echo. I don't know whether it's possible for those people who are not speaking to go on to mute when somebody is speaking, so that I think that sometimes solves the issue, if that's helpful. But we're now going to move to you, Mr. Darlington. You and your opportunity now to speak to committee and to outline the issues.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As I recently just explained, the licence has been held for this premises since 2010. And it was an address change in 2018 that's referred to on the previous matters. My understanding is that there's been no previous reviews of the licence during that period of time. I acknowledge that there are references in the papers to reports being made on some dates, which I think, Madam Chair, you've just been referring to. But it would appear that there's nothing more than reports in relation to those based upon what we've just heard. So the weight that they're given is, of course, or in my respectful submission, should be quite low. I'm not being dismissive of them, but if they've not been thoroughly investigated or checked out, it is very difficult to give them that strong evidential weight in relation to it. Of course, the position is quite different in relation to the test purchase of the cigarettes in this case, which we know has taken place. And I think a bit of background in relation to Mr. Mahmood here is helpful. He's been suffering from ill health for a number of years. He suffers from leukemia. He's recently had been diagnosed with a heart condition and suffers lots of pain and dizzy spells, fainting and collapsing. So his hand on the tiller, as it were, of this premises has not been as strong as it may otherwise have been. And for a number of years, he's been trying to sell the business and find somebody else to take it on so that he can step away, because he accepts he's not well enough to give it its full-time attention that it needs. That's been somewhat difficult over the last few years, trying to find a buyer for the property, for the business, but he has now found a buyer. What that has resulted in, of course, is that over a period of time, he had to bring in more people to help him run the premises. And on the day in question, it was one of those other people that he brought in that had sold these cigarettes in question. Whilst he accepts a lapse of judgment because they were his cigarettes, they were Mr. Mahmood's cigarettes that he left on the premises, they were for his own use and were not for resale. He'd accidentally left them behind when he left the premises, but with no intention that anybody should be selling those. He accepts that it's a lapse of judgment for him to buy them for his own personal use in the first place. But the issue here predominantly is the sale of them. So it is an element of his health that has led to this, and not having that control on the tiller that he would normally have. In relation to the cigarettes, he would respectfully submit that it is an isolated incident, that he's in relation to the sale of alcohol that's referred to in the statement of PC Ditter, he's not aware of that incident. They do. It is common knowledge, as the officer has just referred to, that in that parade of shops and that area of Breightmet, that they do sometimes get the congregation of youths, and they are quite diligent in how they deal with that at Royal News, in terms of asking for ID. They have CCTV that covers both inside and just outside the front of the premises, so that they can try and keep an eye on what is going on and who's buying what, and they do challenge that as appropriate. Of course, the statement that PC Buckfield has attached from his colleague is very much a hearsay statement. It appears on face value to be a statement that's from that's been taken by an officer from a parent who's repeating what they've been told by a child who's been caught having been found drunk. So testing the probative value of that evidence is very difficult, and we're not really here to do that today anyway. We're here to consider what has caused reason to review this licence, and having identified that cause, whether it is a well-founded cause, and if it is, what should or can be done to deal with that. So I would ask that in relation to the minors element, there's very little substantial evidence, and it's certainly not of a persistent nature, that evidence in relation to the selling of alcohol to minors. Nonetheless, Mr. Mahmood accepts the lapse of judgment in relation to the cigarettes that were then sold by a member of staff who is no longer employed by the store. However, turning to the issue at hand, in terms of the review, one further note, I've got a note here that my clients informed me that trading standards did attend with a canine inspection a couple of weeks ago, and nothing was found, so that should be reassuring for the panel. But in terms of how we deal with the review, you have heard from the licensing authority that documents were sent across to them, which I was given by my client in relation to a new lease for the premises, because there is now a buyer for this business, and that's Akhtar Bilal Mohammed, who is with me now. He is a buyer for this off license and this business, and with that in mind, an application to transfer both the designated premises supervisor and the license itself has been submitted to the local authority. I think yesterday that was submitted. We did try to discuss that with responsible authorities before it was submitted, which is the reason there was a bit of a delay in submitting it. But given the COVID issues, I think communications between the parties have been a little bit more difficult, so we haven't been able to discuss it at length, but everybody was emailed in relation to this proposal so that they could carry out any checks that they may wish to do so. But the proposal is effectively for Mr. Mahmood to no longer be running this business, be no longer the owner of this business. And therefore, when you look at the hearing objectives here and the deliberations for committee, I think that's very, very important. Because of course you've got a number of options here that you can deal with. I mean, our respective submission is that in terms of Mr. Mahmood's handling of the premises, it's not been as good as it could have been. That's accepted, but that in reality the misdeeds here are not, whilst I'm not trying to diminish them, it's not a persistent pattern of issues that you sometimes see at these committees over a long period of time with lots of different types of issues. It's relatively isolated. So our initial submission, if we were just dealing with Mr. Mahmood, would be along those lines and of a relatively minor intervention from the committee. But I'm going to put them to slightly one side a little here because, as I said, the objectives of the committee isn't to really try whether these matters have happened or not. It's to deal with the reason for the review and whether, having considered that there is an issue, how that issue is dealt with in terms of the licensing objectives. So it's my submission that if we are transferring the license to a third party and the designated premises supervisor is being transferred to a third party who is not the current premises license holder or current DPS, that in effect would deal with the issue that the committee is here to consider today, because that would be a new operator, it will be a new supervisor of that premises who is not, to my knowledge, there have been no issues reported in relation to his holding of a personal license, which he already does, nor any issues that I'm aware of in relation to any businesses that he's run previously. So in terms of dealing with those objectives, I would respectfully submit that does deal with them. So you may feel, therefore, that would deal with what we're here for, but you have the slightly practical issue of, if you agree with that submission that I've made, of how you deal with that in the immediate situation now, because at this precise moment in time, the license is still in Mr. Mahmood's name and he is still the designated premises supervisor, and there is an inherent lag in the application process for those transfers to go through. They are administrative processes, which the only objections that can be received to those are from the Home Office or the Chief of Police in relation to those transfers. But assuming for a moment that there are no objections there, because they would only be able to object if there was a serious concern in relation to those individuals. And I have circulated the details of the new owner prior to today. Your main concern then may be how we deal with it as of the end of the review hearing, because the lease that that has been submitted identifies a transfer of business date as being the 6th of April, because this had already been lined up to be the beginning of the new financial year. So I think that leaves the committee with a few options, being pragmatic about this situation, is that you could take no action or make an informal warning under the guidance 11.17. If you felt that was appropriate with the transfers in the offing. You could, should you so wish, immediately remove, if you felt it was appropriate, immediately remove Mr. Mahmood as DPS, and Mr. Mohammed, who is coming in, would be prepared to stand in his stead with immediate effect if that was necessary. Or you could, and of course this isn't my preferred submission, but it is an option, you could impose a very short suspension of the licence with a view to it then coming back online for when Mr. Mahmood is due to take over that premises, being the 6th of April. Of course, the question here is that any action that's taken should be no more than is an appropriate response to address the concerns raised by the representations for the review. And it's on that basis that I make those submissions on how you can deal with this matter. Of course, it is in the report that because of the nature of the cigarette matter brought before you, that revocation is something that is to be considered, even on a first occasion, but it is only that, it is only a consideration. It doesn't have to be implemented, and it's not necessary to do that. It is only necessary for you to have thought about it. And given the other submissions that I've made, I respectfully submit that that isn't an appropriate response to what you have before you, particularly given that whilst a lease has been signed for the incoming operator, the value of goodwill attributed to the business is very much intrinsically linked to the premises license. And if you were to revoke the current premises license, you would be depriving the incoming operator of a license for which they would have to make applications for, which, as you will be aware, is quite a lengthy and burdensome and very expensive process, which would in effect have a knock-on effect of the value of the goodwill of the business. And there is case law which says that a premises license does attribute goodwill, and that to remove that person's asset and the goodwill, there must be extremely good reasons to do so. And it's my respectful submission that given that either a change of DPS or a very, very short suspension would deal with the issues at hand, it would not be proportionate to impose a revocation at this point. Of course, we could look at the licensing conditions themselves. I'm not sure whether there is anything in particular that you may consider adding to that, other than keeping more of maybe a condition in relation to record keeping of tobacco sales, but that is, it's a tobacco and cigarette sales, sorry, but that's more of a tobacco and cigarette focus rather than an alcohol focus. But that's probably the only real condition that you could add to further the issue that's been raised. So they're my submissions. I don't know whether you have any questions, Chair, or other committee members in relation to those.
I've got a question, please, Chair.
Sorry, I'm speaking to you on mute. Councillor Newell, yes.
Yeah. Mr. Darlington, can you tell us, please, the new owner and the new supervisor is a Mr. Mohammed. Does he have any connection in any way with Mr. Mahmood or Mr. Mahmood's family? Did you hear that, Chair? Sorry.
Could you?
I think Mr. Darlington may be asking Mr. Mahmood. That's why it might be a.
Oh right, sorry, I wasn't sure whether.
Apologies. No, I accidentally left myself on mute. I don't believe they're related. No.
You don't believe they're related? Could you ask Mr. Mahmood?
Yeah. Sorry. Sorry, when I say I don't believe, I have asked the question before the hearing, and they're not related.
They're definitely not related.
Yeah, definitely not related.
Okay, thank you.
He did just shout that from the other side of the room, but I don't know whether you could hear.
Yes. Any further questions? Nobody wants to ask any further questions. I just have a few questions I'd like to know. Obviously, you've explained the reason why Mr. Mahmood has staff. Could you tell me how many staff Mr. Mahmood has working in his business?
Just bear 1 second. I'll just double check the answer to that. Thank you, Chair. I think 4 or 5 through a combination of family members and staff.
Right. And are they what you might call official members of staff? You know, are they sort of do they pay tax and insurance on their wage, etc., or are they just friends and family that pop in for a few hours now and again?
Just bear with me 1 second. I'll ask that question. Thank you, Chair. Yes, my understanding is it is the family owners of the business. Occasionally, if there is their need because Mr. Mahmood's unwell and needs a spell, it might be a slightly further family member, but that's just as a favour as opposed to being employed. But they do have an unemployed member of staff as well, for which they do pay tax and national insurance.
Right. So that employed member of staff is a different one than the employed member of staff that was in when the test purchase was taken. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And was that member of staff, were they dismissed because of this action?
Well, let me just check that for you. Yes, that's correct.
Right. Mr. Mahmood is saying that the cigarettes were his, that they were just under the counter. How many packets of cigarettes then were under the counter that belonged to Mr. Mahmood?
Okay. I understand there were 5 at the time, but they were all for his own use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where does he normally keep the, want of a better word, the legitimate cigarettes? Where are they kept in the shop?
There is a cabinet. Let me see if there's photographs in here. I have visited the premises, so I can help answer this. I'm just having a look at the photographs that have been submitted. On page 21,
Yeah.
where you've got the photographs of from the body worn camera.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you see the bit that says "can't find what you're looking for" in the background of image 176 and image 178? It's to the right of where it says "can't find what you're looking for." It says "to back," and then it cuts off.
Yeah, 178, that's correct.
Yeah, there's a cabinet there, which is a cupboard cabinet with a sliding door across the front of it. Yeah. So the tobacco, so the cigarettes are kept in that cabinet behind
Right.
the sliding door.
Right. So this member of staff had worked for Mr. Mahmood for a little while and will have been trained by Mr. Mahmood in all aspects of looking after the shop. Is that correct?
I'll just clarify that. Yes, that's correct.
Right. So Mr. Mahmood had trained this gentleman that all cigarettes come from the cabinet behind.
Yes.
On this occasion, somebody comes in and asks for some cigarette, if you're going cheap cigarettes, and he immediately goes under the counter and brings out a packet of cigarettes that he would recognise as being not permitted. They would not be in the plain paper, and sells them to the gentleman, to Mr. Charlton.
I think it's difficult for us to really comment on that because my client wasn't there. So the only thing that we've really got in relation to that is the, I'm just trying to find the right page for it. It's the statement of
Mr. Charlton.
Mr. Charlton, yeah. Sorry, I'm just trying to find the right page for his statement.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've only really got the statements of Mr. Charlton for that, yes.
Right.
Which a lot of this is. Sorry, it's not Mr. Charlton, is it, who attends? It's Mr. Smith.
Is it not Mr.
No, Mr. Smith is the attending person who has
purchase. Yeah.
Yeah, Ben Smith. He attends and he doesn't actually comment too deeply on that point. It's a pre-written statement that he's just filled in some blanks in. So he does. So I think we'll be taking that with a slight pinch of salt because it's not very clear from that statement on the particular point that you make whether he specifically asked for just a packet or whether he's asked for a cheap packet or whether it was the first thing that happened. I'm trying to not draw too much one way or the other from it because it's very clear that this is a pre-written statement that he just filled in a couple of blanks.
Well, I mean, the thing is, obviously, from my point of view, we've got a staff member who has been trained in how to sell cigarettes in the shop, and for some reason, he doesn't go to the cabinet. He goes under the counter and brings out cigarettes that he would recognise as not being legal. Can we accept? Is that?
He should have done.
Yeah. And I presume that Mr. Mahmood spoke to him afterwards and said, "Why did you do that when you know the mine? Why have you done that?"
I'll just check that particular question. Just bear with me 1 second. He did ask him afterwards, yes, and the staff member said by mistake.
Right.
I can't go into any probative value of that. But,
No. And
that's all my client's been told.
Yeah. No. That you can only accept what he said. It was just that I just wonder why, if it was a mistake, he also charged him just £6 instead of I believe it's £11 something.
Mm. Unfortunately, I can't really answer that question because I've not spoken to the staff member because he's been dismissed.
Yes. Okay. And it was just for that one incident that he was dismissed?
I think so, but I'll just double check.
Doesn't matter really. I mean, it's just interesting. That's all.
Yes, the risk was too high in relation to that staff member.
Okay, so it wasn't something he'd done regularly then, right? Okay.
Not that they're aware of.
Does Mr. Mahmood keep a refusals list?
They do keep a refusals list. Yes.
Is it regularly used? I mean, if we went now, would there be lots of refusals in?
If you went now, there would, yes.
Right. Okay. Right. I think I've more or less covered. Are there any questions that any of the other officers would like to ask on what's been put forward?
Could I ask another question, please, Chair?
Oh, sorry. Yes, certainly. Councillor Newell.
Mr. Darlington, if somebody comes into the shop and asks your client for cheap cigarettes, what do you understand that to, what does he understand that to mean, cheap cigarettes? What are cheap cigarettes in your client's shop?
Just bear me 1 second, Alice. The cheapest ones on the shelf are in that cabinet that we were just referring to.
So if somebody says, have you got any cheap cigarettes, Mr. Mahmood would just refer a customer to the cabinet behind them and offer the cheapest brand of legal cigarettes. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, but on this occasion, when somebody asked for cheap cigarettes, the member of staff got some illegal ones out of a bag under the counter.
It would appear so, but my client wasn't present, so we can, as I say, we can only go off what the statement of Ben Smith says.
So, right, okay. So your client was aware that these cigarettes were under the counter?
Yeah, he'd left them there. He'd gone out to another shop for his own errands, right, and left them there. He didn't intend anybody to sell them because they weren't in the location where cigarettes.
So did he leave instruction for the member of staff that was in the shop not to touch those cigarettes?
I'll just double check that. I don't think there was a specific instruction because they didn't feel that they needed to tell him that because he already knew that he was only to sell stuff from the cabinet.
Right, thank you.
Clearly that's not happened and he's no longer working with them.
Right, thank you, Mr. Darlington. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just briefly, I mean, I'm just wondering about Mr. Mohammed, who's hopefully taking over the shop in April. Yeah. Has Mr. Mohammed run other newsagents, half licensed shops? Is that something he's familiar with?
I believe he's been involved in certainly working at them. I'll just ask whether he's operated them. Yeah, he's not run his own shop yet, but he has worked in other people's shops, so he understands how to do so, and he is a personal license holder already. So he's got training on the licensing objectives and the like.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. Thank you very much. Now then, sorry, I'll just go back now to see if any of our officers want to ask any questions. Ms. Pritchard, do you want to ask anything, or are you?
Yes, sorry, could I just ask a question around, was Mr. Mahmood working in the shop in 2018?
Just wait 1 second, I'll ask that question. Can I just clarify exactly what you mean by in 2018? It's a long period of time.
Yeah, I'm just referring to page 31 of the JTI representation, which says that they also visited premises in Bolton in 2018.
Yeah, I have asked my clients about that, and they're not aware of that test purchase in 2018.
Right, okay. But there was tobacco, illicit tobacco on the premises at that point.
It in this submission it would appear so, but a lot of this submission looks like it's cut and pasted, so you might need to speak to JTI for full clarification. But my client's not aware of any test purchase in 2018.
Chair, JTI are here. I wonder if they could provide any for that.
Yes, we can ask them. Thank you. Is that you, Mr. Howell?
It
Would you
is.
be able
Hello
to
there.
help us
Yes.
with this? Thank you.
Yeah, specifically 2018. The test purchase was done on the 13th of July, and a pack of Richmond cigarettes was bought at that time for £5. And the note says the product was retrieved from the back room in the store.
And that was
and again,
definitely
it was
this shop.
yes, that was this shop. Yeah. The person behind the counter is not the same as in the image you have in your in the information pack. It's someone else.
Right, but you have an image of that person.
I do. I've got a very similar summary report like the one you have in your pack for that test purchase that was done in 2018.
Thank you. Mr. Darlington, you may wish to ask a question on that.
I mean, it's more a case of it. I might just need to take some instructions if the question is that your officer was asking was specifically referring to that date. So if I could have a couple of minutes, now I know what the date is that's being referred to.
Okay, yes, we just want to speak to him.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I've just taken instructions on that, and I understand that from around February 2018 onwards, for a good few months, it was a rather turbulent time with Mr. Mahmood's health, and he was in and out of hospital and spent some time in intensive care as a result of the leukemia. So during that period of time, in 2018, there were a few different people who they had working in the store. Because Mr. Mahmood wasn't able to do that himself. So without going back into all the records from back in 2018, it'd be very difficult for them to say today who was working on that day.
Thank you for that. Could I just ask, I mean, I understand what you're saying on the two occasions that it would appear that test purchases have taken place. Mr. Mahmood hasn't been present at either of them. However, does Mr. Mahmood understand that it is he that is responsible? That is the very point of having the qualifications and the licenses, etc., and that really we can't just blame other members of staff. If the training has been done properly, then you would understand, you would expect these staff to understand. I'm just wondering why Mr. Mahmood feels he isn't taking responsibility for what's happened.
I think that might be a slight misinterpretation. Maybe it's the way I put it across. He accepts that he's the DPS and that he is responsible for upholding licensing objectives for the premises, and it's as a result of his ill health that he's realised he's struggling to do that. Hence, he's been trying to sell the business for a number of years. So all he can say is that from his perspective, he can't elaborate more because he wasn't there, but he accepts that it's still his premises and that he's the DPS at the moment. So he is responsible for the actions of his employees.
Right. Okay. Right. Thank you for that. Are there any further questions from officers? Anybody wants to ask any more questions? No? Well, then in that case, Ms. Pritchard, do you want to sum up? Is there anything you need to add at this stage before we ask Mr. Darlington to sum up and leave the meeting?
Chair, no, there's nothing really to sum up, just that you've heard from the trading standards, GMP and JTI and the licence holder today, and just to consider what you've heard and decide whether any steps are necessary to promote the licensing objectives, in particular protection of children from harm and prevention of crime and disorder, and the options are outlined in the report.
Thank you for that. Mr. Darlington,
Yes,
it's now your opportunity. We feel that we've heard everything that we need to know, but if you wish to add anything or emphasise anything, this is your opportunity before we metaphorically ask you to leave and we discuss the meeting.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I outlined our representations and position mostly previously. Effectively, Mr. Mahmood accepts that that he is ill healthy, meaning that he's falling short a little on this premises, and he's already taking steps to deal with that matter. And there are applications in to transfer this premises, lock, stock and barrel, both licence and DPS, to the incoming party, Mr. Mohammed. My respectful submission is that will deal with any concerns that the committee may have in relation to the upholding of the licensing objectives, because there's a new operator coming in who will be able to manage those. I'm not aware of any issues with his personal licence or any concerns that may be shared with that. So with that in mind, my submissions are that you can take a more lenient approach in relation to the current licence holder, because the future is effectively mapped out as dealing with those licensing objective concerns, and that you could deal with that either by way of, if you wanted to do so, by way of a warning at this moment in time, an immediate removal of the DPS, and we can bring in Mr. Mahmood straight away, or if you didn't feel that was enough, a short suspension of the licence up until the point that Mr. Mohammed, is due to take over on the 6th of April.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Well, thank you for coming. I appreciate these meetings are not as easy as they used to be, as we're all having to, in effect, deal with it over the phone. But I hope that you feel that you've had an opportunity to say everything that you wanted to say.
Chair, can you just check if anybody from Trading Standards or Mr. Howell wants to say anything in summing up?
Yes, certainly. I thought when I asked for officers, but anyway, Mr. Howell or Trading Standards, is there anybody who wishes to speak?
Hello, this is Liam Kelly from Trading Standards.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The panel has asked some very vital questions, so I have no questions to ask. And in just summing up, I would just point out that the cigarettes were clearly illegal and believed to be counterfeit. They were being sold in the shop. It's certain criminal activities are be treated very seriously, and this includes the sale and storage of smuggled tobacco.
Thank you. Mr. Howell, did you wish to speak?
Just to reinforce what your last speaker has just said, and also to draw attention to the same sort of test purchase in 2018, which may well suggest an ongoing behaviour in the store.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Darlington, normally we would always say that you get the last word. So if there's anything you wish to just add now, I'm happy for you to say it before we retire.
I think my only follow-up comments following those that have just been made would be that whilst I've made submissions in relation to the probative value of the evidence before you on those particular points, but the solution that we're discussing here and the submissions that we've made relate to the future of the premises, which is really what the licensing committee need to be concerned with, is about the future the future operation of the premises, as opposed to too much about the past when you're looking at whether you need to put extra conditions in or whether the premises can be operated in future in accordance with the licensing conditions. And because we're proposing a complete change of operator, I think that puts a slightly different complexion on things.
Thank you. Okay. So if you could now leave and just leave the members of the committee, our legal team and democratic services, that would be, and we will let you know within 5 working days. And I apologise for the echo.
Can I just clarify, Chair? Because obviously
Yes.
Mr. Mahmood is represented. Where's the decision going to be sent? Is it going to be sent to both me and Mr. Mahmood?
Yeah, I can do that. I can email it, Chair, to both.
I'd be grateful for that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
John, can you end the meeting, please?